Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Tuesday. Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets, powered by FTN, right here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney here with you. As always, appreciate the time here today to hang out on this Tuesday. October officially here. The NHL gets underway tonight. We have the Kraken, the Seattle Kraken, making their NHL debut in Vegas against the Golden Knights. We also have the two-time defending Stanley Cup champions this evening, the Tampa Bay Lightning taking on the Pittsburgh Penguins. We have three baseball teams facing elimination here today. We have the Astros, who can get it done against the White Sox. They're up 2-1. Chicago won the last game. We really need the White Sox today, but I'm not going to lie. The Astros are plus money on the money line, and Lance McCullers has kind of eaten up the White Sox over the last two games. Okay. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Chris Meaney here. Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets, powered by FTN, right here on Game Plus Network. Thanks, as always, for taking the time to hang out on this Tuesday. If you're following along on my Twitter account, watching live on the FTN YouTube page, if you have any questions at any moment, leave them there, and we will get to them throughout the show. It could be Week 6 waiver wire rankings, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. We'll talk about all of that in a little bit. We'll go through some of the major news items from Week 5 of the NFL season. A lot of big-name players went down, unfortunately. A lot of running backs, Saquon Barkley, the biggest, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, also down. Looks like we're going to be without those two for the next few weeks. We'll talk about all of that in a little bit. It is opening night in the NHL. Yes, October is the best sports month. It really is. We got the NHL happening tonight. The NBA, I believe, a week from today. A tip-off in the NBA. Baseball playoffs still happening. How about the Red Sox? How about the Red Sox over the weekend? What a fluky random play that was. Off the wall, off Renfroe, over the wall. No runs scored. Oh, man, it was crazy. The Red Sox find a way to win that game. And then they blew a 5-0 lead yesterday, only to walk off and win in Red Sox fashion. We have the Astros and the White Sox going at it this afternoon, so the winner of that will take on the Boston Red Sox in the American League Championship Series. And of course, it is Boston who's waiting for everybody else. It seems like you have one bad year with the Red Sox, but for the most part, this is a team that's always in the postseason. And it kind of seems right? Fitting October baseball at Fenway. We have the Braves and the Brewers this afternoon as well. Atlanta up 2-1. I think they call him Jocktober with the 3-run shot yesterday. I believe Jock Peterson has 2 pinch hit home runs in this series so far this season. This is a guy who just kind of steps up under the bright light. So the Braves up 2-1 on Milwaukee. And then we have the Giants and the Dodgers this evening. The Giants can close it all out. But it's opening night in the NHL. We have the Vegas Golden Knights and the Seattle Kraken. The Kraken making their NHL debut. And man, I can't keep up. There's a lot going on here, not just in the world of sports, but with the Kraken. Like Kalle Yarncrux on the COVID list. He's not going to play. Giannis Donskoy is on the COVID list. He's questionable. Jared McCann is questionable. Same thing. Jamie Oleksiak. And then Marcus Johansson. So like they have 5 dudes who are on the COVID list, and Yarncrux is already rolled out. And I don't know if the other 4 are going to play. So we could see Alexander Venberg play in that top line with Schultz, or with Jaden Schwartz rather, and then Jordan Eberle. So that could be their top line here tonight against the Golden Knights. Vegas massive favorites on the money line. And then Tampa Bay, defending 2-time Stanley Cup champions. They're going to raise the banner, and then they're going to play a depleted Penguins squad without Evgeny Malkin and Sidney Crosby. Jeff Carter going to play on that number 1 line tonight as well. So it looks like 2 teams here in Vegas and Tampa Bay, massive favorites, but that's okay. We'll try to find a few bets for you towards the end of the show. We'll talk about those games, some shot props. Also, a chance to dive into some futures. We kind of touched on it on Friday, towards the end of Friday's show. I have a free article over at ftmbets.com just listing all my favorite futures. I gave top 3 in terms of awards like Rocket, Hart, Vezina, Calder, all that stuff. My pick for the bet, and then also a couple others, some long shots that you can get involved, some division parlays. I don't know what books you use, but you can parlay some divisions. Vegas heavy favorites, Colorado heavy favorites. I think both of those teams win their division, but also think you could parlay them in with a Carolina or an Islanders team, maybe a Florida team as well. We'll dive into all of that towards the end of the show. And then I have 10 players who I feel went undrafted in fantasy hockey leagues. I just looked across ESPN, Yahoo, Fantrax, whatever format you do play, and just took 10 guys that I feel should be owned, and their ownership is fewer than 50%. So a whole lot of hockey talk, minimal baseball talk. I do think the Astros get it done today. Unfortunately, that's going to break my heart, but Lance McCullers on the bump. They're plus money, and I don't know, he's kind of had his way with the White Sox his last 2 starts. Hit a season-high 10 strikeouts against them in his final tune-up against them in the regular season. And then he was untouchable in the first game against the White Sox in this series. I do think, we can continue to hammer unders with the Braves and the Brewers and the Dodgers and the Giants. This has been a trend that's, I think, continues here tonight. And some NFL talk, right? As I mentioned, so we'll hit the waiver wire with all of the running backs and the wide receivers, and there's been some major injuries, and we're into bye weeks now. Week 6 already in the NFL. It's crazy. I am a little overwhelmed. I'm not going to lie. There's a lot going on in the sports world, but I'm here for it, and I love it. A brand new hockey show to tell you about, which launches today at 4:30 Eastern with myself and Eric Young. It's going to come at you every Tuesday and Thursday. It's going to be absolutely free. You can watch, hang out live with us. You can check it out after on the YouTube page, up on ftmbets.com as well. And it's going to be a show that's going to cover everything in hockey. It'll be on Tuesday and Thursday, as I mentioned. So Tuesday, we'll kind of see the week that happened, the weekend that happened. We'll take a look at the week to come. We'll also have some DFS plays for Thursday. Take a quick peek at a Wednesday. Usually the busy nights in the NHL are Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that's why we wanted to have the show. And by the way, the new show name, I shout out to Josh Kalachi for this one. It is Dangle Bets Selly. I dig it. I like it. Our guy Steph from FTN says he doesn't understand the show name. I mean, tell me you don't know hockey without telling me you don't know hockey. We Dangle Bets and Selly. Let's go. Everyone loves a good Selly, and hopefully we can nail the bets and, dangle, right? I was listening to I shout out to Dangle, Snipe, and Selly. It's it's not really a podcast. It's just like a video montage stuff on YouTube. So I can't take credit for the name, although I do dig it. I'm not great at naming shows, and everyone that I named seems to be in the recycle bin a few weeks later on. Maybe it's because of the host of the show wasn't great, but we're still kicking here, Mean Streets. I don't see any questions. Any questions, hit me up. Come on, I know you got some starting to sit questions, you got some waiver wire questions, you got some hockey questions. Feel free to leave them there in the chat, and we will, like I said, address them. So as I mentioned with that hockey show, it will be free Tuesdays and Thursdays. We'll take care of all the season-long people in there. On Thursdays, we'll look at the weekend streams. We'll take a quick peek at 4-game streams, something I love in head-to-head hockey leagues. You know, you want to maximize all your ads. You want to have as many 4-game streams on your team as possible. What we're not really we're not going to panic here. I mean, the puck hasn't even dropped, so we're not going to get crazy into drop this guy and pick up this guy and stream him. So you want to have some patience with your squad. I think by like American Thanksgiving is a really good kind of point in the NHL season where you can cut ties with guys who, you know, are underperforming, and you get a really good feel too. I mean, if you're not in a playoff spot, then, you know, right in around the bubble, I know a lot can happen in the second half, but typically if you're not in a playoff spot around American Thanksgiving, it's not great. It's not a great outlook, right? And speaking of Thanksgiving, hopefully all my Canadian friends north of the border had a fantastic Thanksgiving. So that show, subscribe. It will be available on iTunes. It will be available on Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts, but you can catch us live today, 4:30 Eastern. Myself, Eric Young, will preview everything in the NHL and hit the waiver wire, take care of everything DFS season-long stuff. But for the most part, going forward, it will be a Tuesday and Thursday show at 9:30 in the morning. All right. That's it, man. A lot off the top and a lot to get to on this show. We're going to talk a little football. We'll dive into the biggest names who went down, what it means. We'll hit the waiver wire, get some running back rankings, get some wide receiver rankings, get some streamers, because as I mentioned, week 6 is here. That means a bye week's officially here. And, oh, man, it was a bloodbath over the weekend. We lost a lot of big names in the NFL. So keep her locked. A little fantasy football talk here next on Mean Streets. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on a Game Plus Network. Thanks as always for taking the time to hang out here. Let's preview last night just a little bit. I guess recap last night. A big come from behind win from Baltimore, 31-25. Lamar Jackson was fantastic in the second half. Actually, he's fantastic really throughout the entire game. He had the fumble towards the, I think it was like in the third quarter, and then the Colts came back and ran that back. And, you know, it was a touchdown called back for a touchdown. It looked like a lateral pass to me, but nonetheless, Lamar Jackson, you know, a lot of people take shots on this guy. He can't throw the football. You know, he's not a quarterback that can do well when his team is trailing and coming from behind, but I don't know, man. I didn't see that last night from Lamar Jackson. I mean, he finished 37 for 43, 442 yards and 4 touchdowns. He ran for 62 yards. The Ravens didn't get their record, the NFL record with I think it would have been 44 straight games with 100 yards on the ground, and they made a big deal out of getting that last week to tie the record. It's kind of like, it is laughable, isn't it? Like, they tried so hard to extend that record, and they just tied it. It's like, all right, good for you. You tied it. You didn't even get it. And you really went all out to get it last week. They didn't get it this week. Latavius Murray has a dud game. It's only 6 carries for 17 yards. But what I noticed with when they were down in the game, it was Devonta Freeman. We saw Tyson Williams get in there a little bit, had a couple touches. He didn't really do a whole lot. Lev Bell was inactive. But for when the game was on the line, like we've been talking about on the show, when the game is on the line, it's a one-score game, they really do trust Latavius Murray in there. He's a better pass blocker. I noticed he caught a ball, and, you know, he was inching closer to
the red zone when in overtime and when they were close to tying that game up, and they eventually did tie it up and had the 2-point convo. But man, Lamar Jackson, like he was fantastic last night. You look at some of his numbers, especially in the first half, like 8 for 11, 107, like accurate, but not really doing a whole lot. Certainly struggling against the Colts defense. And then in the second half, 28 for 31, 331, and 3 touchdowns. So Lamar has a great game. And you know what? Carson Wentz on the other side, I thought had a good game as well. I mean, he had the fumble, classic Carson. He panicked a little bit and he gave up the rock in the red zone. But I thought he made some really good throws. I did. 25 for 34, 402 yards, and had 2 passing touchdowns. Michael Pittman Jr. is a guy we've talked about a lot on this show. And I'll be honest, I was a little uneasy after week 1, the way I was seeing this Colts offense, but also something to keep in mind that Carson Wentz wasn't really with the team all that much in training camp. He had the foot injury, dealing with 2 sprained ankles. He didn't get a lot of time to, have some chemistry with some of these guys. Certainly Michael Pittman Jr. is his guy. Like, there's no question. He had back-to-back weeks with 12 targets, 8 targets, and then yesterday he reeled in 6 of his 7 targets, 89 yards, and had a touchdown. We had that yesterday as well, plus money at 4.5. I take that every time, just considering the amount of air yards that he's eaten up. He had like over 60% of his team's air yards over, week 2, 3, and 4. Heading into week 5. So he has been a pleasant surprise. Paris Campbell showed up a little bit, 6 targets, 4 grabs, 56 yards. I'm not crazy about him. T.Y. Hilton is hanging around waiver wires. I'm not crazy about him either. But in deeper leagues, I suppose you can pick him up if you see him on your wire, and then you can just stash him, put him on the IR. But I really just think it's like Wentz and Taylor a little bit, and Nyheim Hines, like the tight ends were invisible yesterday. How about the cheap shot from Jack Doyle, right? To putting Buddy's head on the ground and then a penalty, and then, you can't retaliate. You always get the guy who retaliates. But I thought that was just a low move from Jack Doyle yesterday. But Taylor has the big game, right? 15 for 53, a touchdown, 4 targets, 3 grabs, 116 receiving yards and a touchdown, had an explosive 70-yard receiving touchdown. So that's it really from the big takeaways, but Lamar Jackson eats. Oh yeah, and a couple Ravens guys, we got to give a couple shout outs. Certainly, I can't forget about Mark Andrews or Marquise Brown. Andrews, 13 targets, 11 grabs, 147 yards and 2 touchdowns. He goes off. And then Marquise Brown has had a really good season, and towards the end of last season too, he was really strong. He had a couple drops in Detroit that everybody saw, but he rolled in 9 of his 10 targets for 125 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's having a really, really good season. Rashad Bateman, I think he's going to be active this week coming up here. He's hanging around waiver wires. Sammy Watkins left that game with a hamstring injury, so maybe Bateman can step up and be that third option in the passing game for Lamar Jackson. By the way, 24 wins before the age of 25, tied for the most ever with Dan Marino. And his birthday, he doesn't turn 25 until January, so I think he does it. I think he breaks the record. Let's talk about a couple injuries here before we bring up the board and some waiver wire rankings. So there's a lot here. Saquon Barkley, ankle, no timetable, couple weeks. I don't know. He's a freak. He's a solid. He's a quick healer. We've seen him before multiple times, but I think he could be sidelined here for a couple weeks. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, a few weeks expected to miss, dealing with an MCL sprain. And there's some buzz that, Casey's looking into Marlon Mac. I believe Tino mentioned Marlon Mac to me yesterday. I don't know if it was just on the side or if it was on Friday. Actually, I think it was the show with All in Football. He was on the Colts to cover, and he said something about Marlon Mac, who looked good. He got a little bit of run, and, maybe you're just showcasing him if you're the Colts. Why not? Flip him. I think he's a very capable running back, but, you want to give touches to Taylor, not so much to Marlon Mac if you're the Colts. Samaje Perine on the COVID list. I don't know if that means he's going to play this week, and we saw a little bit of Joe Mixon over the weekend. He scored a touchdown, saved your day from a fantasy standpoint, but we could be talking about Chris Evans here a little bit in the next few days. Damian Harris is considered day-to-day with a ribs and chest injury. Juju Smith-Schuster is done for the season with a shoulder injury. Man, it looked bad too. I'm getting shivers right now just thinking about the hit that he took and the pain that he was in. Curtis Samuel, week-to-week groin injury. He came back. He was on IR, and then he came back and re-aggravated something towards closer to kickoff, but yet played. And I don't know, man. I think his season could be lost. I would cut him everywhere, even in deeper formats. Quintez Cephas, broken collarbone, so it looks like he's going to be done for the season. Max Williams is done for the season. He was showing up as the Cardinals tight end. I can't remember Arizona Cardinals tight end who has just, been decent, kind of borderline fantasy relevant. That was really the case for Max Williams over the past couple weeks. I wonder what they do if they bring in a tight end. I think they need one. Like, they're super thin at the tight end position. I was thinking Zach Ertz, kind of maybe he could be a decent asset for them. He's got some experience. I mean, they don't really need another pass catcher in that offense, but they do need a capable tight end. What else we got here? Oh, Trey Lance is kind of week to week. Minimum 1 week, max 2 is what they're saying out of San Fran, dealing with a sprained knee injury, but San Fran on a bye this week. You know, Lance looked okay, looked like a rookie. His 7.5 plus money rushing attempt prop smashed pretty early. I believe he had 16 attempts. He sailed a couple throws. He's definitely better for this offense. I mean, if you want to win now, you probably go with Jimmy G. Got a little bit more experience. He's a winner. He's won a lot of games, and he probably starts out of the bye. But man, just what Lance does with his legs, it gives, you know, the defense has to respect him, because, you know, the safety has to come in to respect the run and at least people in the middle of the field wide open. We saw it on a couple of occasions, especially when they're trying to, get a comeback as well. So Trey Lance, there's some good and some bad, but I think overall from a fantasy standpoint, I think if as long as he's starting, he's going to be, a low end QB1 with upside to be, a pretty solid quarterback one in fantasy. I mentioned Sammy Watkins. Kenny Golladay expected miss this week due to a knee injury. The Jags signed Anthony Miller. I don't know if that means, like, he's a slot guy. Laviska Shenault had played slot basically all last year over the first few weeks, and then they played him on the outside over the weekend, and he only had 1 catch. I mean, sometimes guys that are solidified in the slot and they're used to that role, when they go outside, they face top coverage, and things are just different for them. Sterling Shepard is a good example of that. Juju Smith-Schuster back in the day when he had Antonio Brown in the slot, and then they moved him outside, and he really struggled against top coverage. They had to move him back in the slot. So I don't know what happens there, but that signing means to me, like, Anthony Miller is going to be in the slot, and they're going to move Laviska on the outside. I don't know if that's great for his outlook, but he has been used differently over the past couple weeks, a higher ADOT, but he just hasn't had he just didn't look good. I mean, 1 catch. His 1 catch. I had the over 5.5 on the show. My bad. We also had the over 57.5 receiving yards, and we got it on that 1 grab. So, I mean, you win some, you lose some, you get lucky with others. Ryan Fitzpatrick could be ready to go week 7. I thought Taylor Heineke looked awful in that game against the Saints, but, he's been good from a fantasy standpoint. So we'll see what he can do in his next game. We could see Fitzpatrick under center. And then Tua Tagovailoa could return to practice this week. Let's hit up the waivers, running back waivers here. I got 10 names for you under 50% ownership across most formats, and it is up at the top here, Darrell Williams. So without, CEH for the first few weeks, I think Williams is going to be the guy to get the majority of the carries here. You see Jerick McKinnon on the list as well. I mean, the Chiefs are pathetic defensively. We talked about this on the show. We were on the Bills on the show on the money line. We liked them to cover. We liked a lot of the Bills props. We got lucky with a couple as well in the bet tracker with Zach Moss. He had I think he got his rushing yard by 1. Emmanuel Sanders got his receiving yard by 1, but the Bills torched them. And the week before that, the Eagles didn't punt once. I mean, they moved the ball pretty easily. They had a couple stalls in the red zone with the rookie coaches and just a couple turnovers and stuff like that. But the Chiefs, I mean, dead last in rush DVOA, pass DVOA. They don't look like a good defense. So I think Jerick McKinnon could be in play moving forward if they're going to give up a ton of points. We saw in that game on Sunday Night Football was that Jerick McKinnon was on the field catching passes. I think that's a role that he's going to have in KC, whether it's a 3rd down role, a 2-minute drill, playing from behind. I mean, this defense it's not great. It's that simple. It's not good at all. They've allowed 29 points in each of their first few games of the season, but their schedule is a little soft. I mean, they played some tough teams, right? They played the Bills, they lost to the Bills, they lost to the Chargers, they lost to the Ravens. So they've lost against some really good teams, but I think Williams should be the number 1 ad. I mean, we're going to get him for a few weeks, and if they can control some of these games against some softer opponents on the schedule, then Williams will get more play than Jerick McKinnon. But it's like a Chicago thing, as you see Khalil Herbert there. We talked a lot about Damian Williams, but we said don't forget about Herbert. He could get sprinkled into this offense. He'll be the cheaper ad. You can get him for a couple bucks while a lot of people spend on Damian Williams. That was a split. It was a 50-50 split. Both backs looked good. Clearly in Chicago, they want to run the football. That's not great news for Allen Robinson. It's not great news for Darnell Mooney, but they want to run the rock. They're not letting Justin Herbert throw the football, Fields rather throw the football all that much. And Herbert looked really good in that game. I mean, Williams came in and stole a goal line carry from him. I think he's the veteran back and will probably close out games for them. That was kind of the case, but Herbert played more snaps. It was like a slight 55%, I believe he had of snaps. Booker is in there. P. Ryan, Kenneth Gainwell just under own. So I got 2 New England guys in here. I mean, Brandon Bolden's probably the guy that you want if you need somebody to start right now. But I think Stevenson is a great long-term ad. He got more carries, got more attempts. I don't know the true status on Damian Harris, but he had another fumble on the goal line. That's 2 I believe that I've counted for him in the red zone, and 3 overall on the season. Not what you want to do inside a Bill Belichick offense. You see Chris Evans in there, and then Mark Ingram is just like a pinch. You need somebody. We could talk more about the Giants situation tomorrow with producer Tino when we talk about, Tony and Kenny Golladay. But for Booker, I will say this for Booker. He played more snaps than anybody, a percentage of his team's snaps when Barkley left. And he just seems like that guy who's going to get all the work. Like, I don't care about Brightwell. I don't care about anybody else on this team. Also, Daniel Jones left and, with a concussion. So there's a lot of injuries all of a sudden on this Giants team. But Booker has a couple decent seasons, with Denver. He had a couple back-to-back years with 30-plus catches. His yards per attempt, last year in a limited role with Vegas was pretty strong, pretty solid. So he could be a guy that, I would rank him, as long as Barkley's out, as a low-end RB2, as somebody I think could be, a bell cow back, not a great one, but somebody who's going to get probably 20 opportunities. By opportunities, I mean carries, targets as well, carries plus targets. So maybe a lot of opportunities moving forward here for Devontae Booker. We're starting to see some questions rolling. It's a lot of hockey talk. Troy Nowak, legend. What are some shot props for tonight? We'll get to that in a little bit. We'll take a quick break and we'll touch on some wide receivers to target on the waiver wire as well. Keep your lock. Mean Streets continues right here on Game Plus Network. You're watching Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Okay, let's continue the fantasy football talk. We have a free waiver wire article from my guy Joe Metz over at ftnfantasy.com. He's touching on a few players to pick up. And as I said earlier, we're getting into bye weeks, and unfortunately some injuries have happened. So there's a lot of available pieces on the waiver wire who could help you out. We'll talk wide receivers here now. And as we had, I don't know if we had him, Tino, at the top last week, Kadarius Toney, he was either 1 or 2. You gave a lot of love to him, and, he shows up in a big way last week, even kind of slapped the dude, punched him, got kicked out, apologized later, got the emotions best of him, unfortunately for the Rook. But 10 catches on 13 targets and 189 yards. So for over his last 2 games, this guy's got 22 targets, 16 grabs in, and just shy of 300 yards. 281 on the season, but he had -2 in week 1. And he had 16 in week 3. And something that we talked about on this show is with Sterling Shepard. When Shepard comes back, what happens? Is he just a guy that takes over his role in the slot? And they got Toney on the outside. And we just talked about, young wide receivers who get moved out of the slot to the outside. And that's a bit of a learning curve for them. I think Toney has shown over the past 2 weeks that you got to give this guy as much playing time as you can. He's a terrific route runner. He's explosive after the catch. And he's just been so productive over the past 2 weeks. So if you missed out last week, you really did miss out because you're going to have to spend a lot of money to get this guy when, you could have maybe potentially had him a little bit cheaper, but nonetheless, we won't, dive into that. It is what it is, but he's up at the top of the board here for me. And, Kenny Golladay expected this week. So I think we'll start to see, Toney, probably lead the team in snaps and routes run and targets and looks. He's in a really good spot here to pick up a few. So Toney, last chance really to get him. Tim Patrick, I don't get it. I don't understand the ownership. He's hovering around like 20%, 22%. He has another decent game last week. He's just good. He's just a good wide receiver. I know Jerry Jeudy is expected to return, but Tim Patrick is good. Hunter Renfrow is good, like underrated. Is another guy who just kind of shows up and gives you double-digit fantasy points. A lot going on in Vegas. I don't really want to get into John Gruden. He's done from the Vegas Raiders, and it's warranted, right? Some pretty brutal things that he said. Rondell Moore, Arizona, a guy that's always probably going to be on this list, is under-owned. I mean, he had a terrific catch, the toe drag swag. Shout out to Nate Burleson. I mean, he's as good as well. And there's a lot of moving pieces with Arizona. I mean, we've talked about so much that I don't know really what else to say. When it comes to Rondell Moore and everybody else in Arizona, there's going to be some boom and bust with everybody inside this offense, but just own them. Just have them. If you're in a 10-team league, maybe not, but if you're in a 12, just have them on the bench, right? We're going to get into bye weeks. We're getting into them. Injuries are going to happen. It's nice to have somebody linked to one of the best offenses in the NFL. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a solid day. Led the Lions in targets, and Quintez Cephas is done. And TJ Hawkinson, teams are just really focusing in on TJ Hawkinson. I believe it's been 3 straight dud weeks in a row for Hawkinson. So Amon-Ra St. Brown is somebody who's definitely trending up. He's certainly available across every single format. Pick him up, and maybe we'll think about starting him, right? Jameson Crowder, same deal. DeAndre Carter, I put him on here because, I mean, everything can't just go to Cooks. I don't know. There's got to be something here with Carter. Oh, you know what? That's my bad. It's not Houston. It's Washington. So that's my bad on the Houston call there, but he is a member of Washington. So I mentioned last week, or I mentioned in the last segment about Curtis Samuel. You got Logan Thomas on IR. Washington's very thin. Diami Brown left. I mean, somebody needs to step up there and be the 2. It can't just be Terry McLaurin. So my bad on the HST, but he is somebody to monitor in deeper leagues. Mecole Hardman has a big game, but I fully can't trust him. Josh Gordon probably will get sprinkled in and more involved moving forward. Darnell Mooney's on this list. I just said Chicago is not great in terms of just the offense. This doesn't seem to be like a lot of volume in this offense for a guy like Robinson or Mooney, but they are guys that are under-owned and certainly we could see this offense evolve moving forward. Rashad Bateman's, I think, a decent stash. There's a lot of guys on this list like Van Jefferson that aren't on this list, like Van Jefferson I like, and a few others that you can see over at ftnfantasy.com. We do have one question from Sean McCormick. Start 1, PPR, Zach Moss, Allen Robinson, James Conner, Brendan Cooks. I think, honestly, I probably lean Cooks there. But the way that Zach Moss is rolling and the Bills are rolling on offense, I mean, I think Zach Moss is a guy that I would just play every single week. You hope that he finds the end zone. You hope the Bills continue to put up 30-plus points week in and week out and run the clock out in the second half. But Zach Moss looks good. He's running a lot of routes. He looks better than Singletary. Singletary looks good as well. But I think as of right now, McCormick, I think I'm leaning with Moss. But next step for me would be Brendan Cooks. I have a hard time rolling out Allen Robinson. A couple tight ends that I wanted to bring up here with you guys. It just had some massive days. I mean, Kyle Pitts finally shows up, right? He had 9 grabs, 119 yards. You can't get him. Dalton Schultz, you probably can't get him anymore, but another solid game, 6 for 79. Ricky Seals-Jones is somebody that I wanted to bring up when I mentioned Carter. Is, again, there needs to be somebody else to step up inside this offense. It can't just be Terry McLaurin. You got a matchup against the Chiefs this week. We just talked about how that defense is really struggling. So for Ricky Seals-Jones, I mean, you're sitting there with Robert Tunyan, who had a big season last year. He's linked to Aaron Rodgers. He's a member of the Packers. You like the fact that he could, pop off at any moment, but he's had 3 games. He's actually had 4 games with 8 or fewer receiving yards. We hit the under. The only under I gave over the weekend in terms of props was Robert Tunyan under 37.5 receiving yards. And you know what? I didn't have to sweat it out at all because he just didn't get any targets and he didn't catch any balls. But that's a big name player. You spent that draft capital, and that's the toughest thing in fantasy. When you spend that draft capital, whether it's football, hockey, baseball, basketball, on, a guy that you got maybe in the 6th, 7th round, 8th round, 9th round, somewhere in and around that range, and they're not producing for you, it's tough to be like, oh man, I spent that capital. I don't want to cut him. I'm believing. And that's where you can get into trouble. You have to live in the moment, especially at the tight end position. It's all about volume and opportunity. And now you're seeing Ricky Seals-Jones, who had a touchdown against the Giants in week 2 with Logan Thomas there, and Logan Thomas on IR and could miss a couple more weeks. 8 targets, 5 grabs, 41 yards. It's not phenomenal, but it's 9 points in a full point setting. And that's like a top 10 finish, right? This guy finishes as a tight end 7 for the week. He pops off. Hunter Henry is a guy who had another strong week. Back-to-back games with a touchdown. He's got 13 targets and 10 grabs in his last 2 games, 15 in his last 3. He's 46% owned in Yahoo leagues. He's somebody that I would have over Ricky Seals-Jones, but he's in that top 10 conversation for me. And then Dan Arnold, one more before we get out of here, is Dan Arnold. there's, watching the Jags this season, the past couple weeks, they've run the football more than they did in the first few weeks. They were really just throwing a lot and playing up tempo. But I think, they I don't know, took Urban Meyer a little bit to realize that James Robinson is really good and they should give him the ball as much as they can. And they still kind of, there was a 4th and goal play where they gave it to Carlos Hyde. I mean, I digress. But Dan Arnold, there seems to be a role for a tight end inside this offense. In week 1, I believe Manhurts had a touchdown, and then James O'Shaughnessy had a career day, and then he suffered the injury. Then they acquired Dan Arnold just a couple days before that Thursday night football game against the Bengals, and he only got in there and played a couple snaps, but he had 2 targets and 29 grabs. 29 grabs, 2 targets and 29 receiving yards. And then over the weekend, he had 8 targets, 6 grabs, and 64 yards. So 8 targets. I mean, that's eye-popping for a tight end in his first full game with his new team. Dan Arnold I think he just needed to be free, and he's going to be free in Jacksonville. No DJ Chark for probably for the rest of the season. I think he's going to be sidelined. So consider Dan Arnold in deeper formats, tight end position. Dallas Goedert is on the COVID list, so he may not be able to play this week. I'm not saying to cut, TJ Hawkinson or play these guys over TJ Hawkinson, but they're in the conversation for, to be a top 10 tight end. Big names like Jonnu Smith. I wouldn't waste my time with Jonnu Smith. I wouldn't waste my time with Robert Tunyan. I think, the tight end position, you're just looking for guys that are going to get a few targets and targeted inside the red zone. And both Dan Arnold and Ricky Seals-Jones and Hunter Henry are ahead of those guys, are all guys that have gotten looks inside the red zone, not just this season, but last week they were involved respectively on their 3 teams inside the red zone. All right, I think that's all the football talk. I don't know if I really missed. I probably did. If you have any questions, again, hit me up. We have another London game this week, so a plan accordingly as well. Let's get into the hockey talk. We'll take a quick break. We'll preview tonight's action. We'll dive into some waiver wire players, get some NHL futures, and of course, we'll talk some shot props in here next on Mean Streets. Keep her locked. Welcome back. A little NHL talk here on Mean Streets. You're watching on Game Plus Network. Any questions, hit me up. I do see one already here from Troy Nork. He says, should I target Pearson or Höglander this week for waivers? Vancouver, Chicago, and Anaheim have the most games this week, and I have a few Blackhawks and Ducks. Yeah, I think I'd lean Höglander. I don't think you really need to get into streaming so much this early. I don't know if you need to like cut ties on certain players that, you know, you just drafted, but it does sound like Niels Höglander is going to have that top line with JT Miller on the left side and Elias Pettersson at center. So that's where I lean, but certainly Tanner Pearson, you know, he's got a lot of shot volume ability. He's not afraid to shoot the puck. I think he had one game last year with like 12 or 11 shots on goal. Certainly that's not going to be the case all the time, but he is in a top 6 role as well with Bo Horvat and Connor Garland, who I expect a lot of big things from here this season and getting away from Arizona. So Troy, that's kind of what I'm thinking there. And we'll get into some shot props here in just a couple minutes. Again, you know, it's still early, because I'm looking at between the break here on Seattle. I'm not seeing a lot of confirmation on some of these guys if they're going to play tonight. Kalle Järnkrok is out. Jonas Donskoy, Jared McCann, Jamie Oleksiak, Marcus Johansson. These guys are all questionable here to play. They did pick up Alex Barreau-Bollet from Tampa Bay. I mean, the Lightning are so good. They have so much depth that they just got rid of this guy and put him on waivers. And Seattle picked him up right away. I mean, I think there would have been like 28 teams in the league at least that were interested in this guy. He was my sleeper for the Lightning. He won't be the sleeper for Tampa Bay this season, but man, this kid is good. And we're going to be talking about him this year. I don't know if he's going to get in the lineup tonight, but he's going to be a guy that I think we'll talk about in deeper formats and DFS who will be underpriced. And from a shot prop standpoint, I will be heavily interested. So here's what we got for tonight. We got the 2-time defending Stanley Cup champions here this evening. Those are the NHL futures. Vegas plus 850, Florida 22-1, Carolina 25-1. But for this evening here, we got Tampa against the Penguins. So they're going to raise the cup banner here this evening. And Tampa Bay, massive favorites here on the money line. And then the later game, we have the Seattle Kraken and we have the Vegas Golden Knights. So, Tino, that's the NHL futures there. If you have the Golden Knights board, check it up. There we go. Giddy up. The Penguins plus 200, the Lightning minus 230, the over-under at 6, and then the Kraken making their NHL debut here tonight. I thought they would open up in Seattle, but we have to hang on and wait for the home opener in Seattle. And then the Vegas Golden Knights, which is just an awesome atmosphere always. Do yourself a favor and check out a Golden Knights game. You will not regret it. The seats vibrate. They literally vibrate. The openings, they have like a 10 to 12 minute thing intro, and I mean, you're just shaking in your seats, and it is awesome. 5.5 is the total here. You know, I think both of these teams in Pittsburgh and Seattle are going to be in trouble. I do tonight. I mean, the Penguins don't have Sidney Crosby. They don't have Evgeny Malkin. They got Jeff Carter playing number 1 center. I don't like Tristan Jarry. And then you got the whole Tampa thing here at home, the cup banner. You know, I do think that this Tampa team will take a bit of a step back this season. I mean, they lost their entire third line, and I know you may be thinking it's only a third line, but if you've watched the Bolts over the last couple seasons, I mean, Yanni Gourd led the team in ice time throughout the entire playoffs, 5-on-5. He was playing in all situations. He was phenomenal in the Stanley Cup final against the Canadiens. And then they lose Barclay Goodrow and then Blake Coleman from that line. They lost David Savard. So they've lost some pieces here this season. They're still going to be really, really good. It's just hard to back these two teams on the money line. It's hard to back Seattle and it's hard to back Pittsburgh. You know, if you wanted to get in some action and not from a shot prop standpoint, you know, Lightning, Vegas, and then potentially the under in the Vegas game at 5.5, I think that could be the play. But with Seattle here, and there's so many question marks with their roster, I mean, they're coming in shorthanded here, not just their first game in the NHL, but I mean, they could be without a bunch of dudes here. I mean, Yanni Gourd is not going to play. He looks like he's close, but McCann is a big loss. All of a sudden, like Alexander Venberg is playing in your top center role here today. And then a guy who I was actually looking for his shot prop. I can't find it. Check out the show here today at 4:30 Eastern with myself and Eric Young. Dangle, bet, Selly. We'll have a lot of hockey talk for you here today, but Morgan Geekie is maybe not a name that you would put your money on. You would think that you would put your money on, but like the Golden Knights a couple years ago, there's a lot of players here on Seattle that are just going to have an opportunity. I mean, you can't look at their season-long game logs and their career stats and say, oh, you know, Morgan Geekie, I don't think he's a guy that's going to get 2 shots here tonight. But, you know, a lot of these players are going to have opportunity of a lifetime. They're not only going to have a chip on their shoulders from their team, you know, making them available, but they're also going to get ice time that they've never had before. Like Jordan Eberle and Jaden Schwartz, like these guys are used to playing, you know, on first line, second line, whatever. Alexander Venberg played a little bit as the second line center for Florida last season. But these guys are going to top career highs across the board in terms of ice time opportunity. They're going to get power play time that they've never had before. They're going to kill penalties that they've never had that opportunity as well. So Morgan Geekie is a guy that, he popped in the preseason, and he's going to get an opportunity here because they're missing their number 1 and their number 2 center in Seattle. So I can't find anything right now on Geekie. My guess would be 1.5 would be his shot prop. If I'm picking a Seattle guy, it would be Jordan Eberle. But my favorite shot props here tonight, I like Brian Rust at 2.5. He's minus 120. So that's like the go-to for me. Pietrangelo and Pacioretty, you can get at 2.5, but they are juiced up a little bit. I wouldn't go higher than 3.5 with Pietrangelo, but it looks like Shea Theodore is going to be sidelined for this game. He's questionable to play here this evening. So Pietrangelo is a guy that's going to get a lot of ice time here tonight. And then Jeff Carter, who's going to be the number 1 center for the Penguins this evening at 2.5 is minus 125. So, with only 2 games, you can't really parlay a lot. You can just do some singles. So Brian Rust and Jeff Carter, my 2 Penguins guys, and you just pair them up and parlay them if you wanted to with Pacioretty at 2.5 or with Pietrangelo if you can find him at 2.5 as well. I think some books have him at 3.5. I saw 2.5. It is really juiced up to the over, but if you included it in that parlay with a Rust or with a Jeff Carter, I think you should be good to go. But again, I do want to attack some Seattle guys here. I think it's an opportunity to get involved with some of them because of books are just going to be unaware how to really kind of gauge them. Like Jaden Schwartz at 2.5 and Jordan Eberle at 2.5, strong shot props. But, Prize Picks has Giordano at 1.5. They have him at 1 hit. Like you can get involved in the hits over at Prize Picks. Use the promo code FTN for a first-time user. They'll match your first deposit up to $100 and 100% instantly. And I will have a Prize Pick video on our FTN YouTube page today diving into some hockey plays. But Mark Giordano is going to, he's the captain of Seattle. Dude's going to throw a couple hits today. So you can find ways to, just sprinkle a little money tonight because we can't just pick these heavy favorites in the NHL. And if I'm seeing an upset, maybe Seattle in the puck line, not to lose by more than 1 goal here today. But I don't really see the Penguins getting it done here this evening with Tristan Jarry and missing their 2 number 1 centers. So we'll continue to move along here. We'll talk some hockey. We'll get into 10 players that I think could help you out in fantasy hockey. So keep her locked. The NHL talk continues here on Mean Streets. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. So there's a lot of NHL news kind of filtering in here. I will just plug the show once more with myself and Eric Young. Dangle, Bets, Selly. We're going to have some shot props for you. We're going to talk season long. We'll talk, all the news, and we'll really dive into the week to come here in the NHL. Yeah, Troy says he has Matthew and Brady Tkachuk. So they will not. He says they will not be playing for that's why I'm eager to make the move like this. Yeah, I get that, Troy. You got Matthew and Brady. Brady's not going to play for a little bit, so you want to make some move, maximize your upside. It's smart. You're ahead of the game. I love it. I dig it. I'm all about it. It's never too early to make moves and look ahead at the schedule. I just saw before I came on here, Nicholas Backstrom placed on long-term IR. My guy Nick Suzuki signed an extensive, extended, I think, 8-year contract with the Habs. I like that. Jason Robertson not going to play in Thursday's game. Mitch Marner left practice early today, a collision with his teammate. Matthews is not going to play this week. And then Nathan McKinnon is he's in the COVID-related absence protocol. So things happening already in the NHL. Lots happening. And because guys are on COVID and they're already missing time here and they're on IR plus, you could go to the waiver wire and pick up some of these guys who are undrafted who could help you out. So in no particular order here, these are certain guys that I like that could help you out here. And this is available over at ftnfantasy.com as well. But Yanni Gourd at practice over the past 2 days with the number one line with Jaden Schwartz and with Jordan Eberle. He should be rostered. Like, he's going to be, when he's healthy and he's playing, he's going to be a guy that I think is going to be a top 20 centerman in fantasy. He's going to play a ton. He's going to play on the power play. He's going to kill penalties. He loves to shoot the puck. He's going to be a shot prop darling of us for us all season long. So pick him up. He was undrafted because, there was reports he's going to miss the first month, and he could miss most of October here. But it does sound like he's ahead of schedule. You just pick him up and you plug him on IR and you just move on. Joel Eriksson talked about him at length, one of 2 players last season to have 19 shots, at least 100 hits, and at least 100 shots on goal. 19 goals, 100 shots, 100 hits. Number 1 center for Minnesota. Net front presence on the number 1 power play. He's going to play with a Kirill the Thrill Kaprizov, which is great for his outlook. Josh Norris, he's fantastic. He's just really good. And I don't think a lot of people talk about him because of Ottawa. Brady Tkachuk's going to sign eventually. It was one of the best lines in the NHL last year with Brady Tkachuk, Josh Norris, and Drake Batherson. Batherson's hovering around that 52% mark, so he couldn't make this list. But Josh Norris can touch a lot of categories for you. Certainly, if you're playing in leagues with faceoffs, he's a great ad. But he throws his body around quite a bit for a little guy, and he's just a really good player. And I think we'll see a breakout season from him and Drake Batherson. Blake Coleman, he's going to be suspended here for the first game due to a hit from behind in the preseason. But he leaves Tampa Bay and he goes to a team in Calgary where they're going to give him a top 6 role, whether that's on the first line with Tkachuk and Lindholm or on the second line with Monahan or Goudreau. And I think it's going to be that first line with Lindholm and Tkachuk when he is active and he's going to play. And you go back to his days with the Devils, right? You go back to before he went to Tampa and he played roughly 15 minutes a game on the third line, getting no power play time. He's going to get power play time. Daryl Sutter's going to love this guy. He's like a Sutter guy, throws his body around, he back checks hard. He does all those quote unquote hockey things that coaches absolutely love. And he can touch a lot of categories for you. A couple years ago, his last year with New Jersey, he was one of 3 players to have 20 goals, 200 shots, and 200 hits. Josh Anderson and Alexander Ovechkin, the other 2. So he's a category filler. Jesse Puljujarvi broke out last season, 15 goals. He is linked to Connor McDavid on that first line with Zach Hyman, who, Zach Hyman was undervalued, I thought, too, in fantasy hockey drafts, but his ownership is pretty high. But you could roll with Jesse Puljujarvi. He's going to get some power play time as well. And the best thing about Edmonton is that McDavid and Draisaitl stay on the power play the entire time. So, they only sub out a couple dudes, right? It'll be Puljujarvi who steps in, and then Nurse for Barry. Puljujarvi probably steps in for Ryan Nugent-Hopkins or something like that. But Draisaitl and McDavid just stay on the entire time. McCann, another guy who's probably just going to get dropped because of the COVID list thing. Christian Dvorak is going to get a lot of time. He's gelling so far with Drouin and Josh Anderson. Pierre-Luc Dubois is a guy who can touch a lot of categories for you. A down season with the Jets, but certainly has a lot of upside to play in a top 6 role in Winnipeg. And he's not as bad as what we saw last season. He's not. He's a really good player. Just last season was a bit of a crapshoot for him. And then Igor Sharangovich going to get that number 1 spot next to Hughes and Thomas Tatar, who's widely available as well. And Sharangovich impressed me last season as a rookie. And then Nick Ritchie. I mean, it may not be a good first week stream considering Matthews is not going to play here this week, but it does sound like he's going to earn that left wing role on the first line with Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner when the Leafs are at full health. So he's somebody to certainly keep an eye on as well. All right, we got about 3 minutes left in the show. One more segment, and we will touch on some NHL futures. Your last chance to get in on some division parlays, some over-under goal props, and some Stanley Cup futures as well. Of course, you can do it throughout the season, but you got to find that value right now. So we're going to seek the value. I got a couple future props for you next here on Mean Streets.
Hey, welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. All right, we're going to talk a little NHL futures. I got a free article over at ftmbets.com, and if you're north of the border, cool bet is like take advantage of them because they got some season-long props like Anders Lee at 19.5. They got Ilya Sorokin at 34-1 to win the Vezina, and he's like 12-1, 15-1 in most spots. So, I mean, take advantage of cool bet if you can because they got some season-long goal props there. I got about 15 to 20 of them listed for free over at ftmbets.com. All right, here's what I'm thinking for Stanley Cup futures. I mean, I have Vegas up at the top. There's no value in Colorado. I don't know what the big deal is with Colorado. They get too much respect. This team can't win 2 rounds. At least Vegas, in their 4 years, they've been to the third round 3 times. They went to the finals once. Their division is super easy. They're basically a lock to get to the third round, and they beat up on Colorado pretty easily last year, and their team is intact. I mean, they probably improved with the addition of Dadonov. I know Fleury's not there, but Leonard's good enough to hold down the fort. The Panthers at 22-1. Most spots have them at 18-1. I saw like a 20-1 in certain spots, but this is going to go away soon. The Panthers are legit. They're going to score a lot of goals. I think Spencer Knight, a rookie, could take them to the next level. And then Carolina's another long shot there at 25-1 that I like. I think that they have an opportunity to win their division. And speaking of divisions, I got a couple division props here for you as well. So I really dig Florida at plus 500. As I said earlier, I think Tampa takes a bit of a decline. It's tough to go against the Bolts, and this is a good division. I mean, I just don't think Toronto has it. We'll get to them in a little bit. And Boston's, they're missing. I just don't love their defense. They got a few holes. Life without Rask and Krejci, they could adjust a little bit. They could go through some growing pains in Boston. So I think Florida is legit. I love what they can do on offense everywhere. You see Carolina in there. And so division parlays, you can do this at BetMGM. You can do it at Bet365. You can do it on FanDuel. I think DK will allow it as well. Florida and Vegas plus 750. I got an Islanders, Vegas, and Colorado one in the bet tracker. I think you could just parlay like Vegas and Colorado. I mean, you're not going to, that's like plus 125 alone, but you can chuck in the Hurricanes or you can chuck in the Islanders, either or. And I think that makes for a really strong parlay if you don't feel Florida like me, because it is a really tough division. And then some team point totals here. The under for the Montreal Canadiens, I just think that they're really going to struggle this year. You're missing a lot of leaders in that dressing room with Carey Price and Shea Weber. You lost Philip Deneau, one of the best defensive centers in the league. A short offseason, which you're not used to. Joel Edmondson is not going to start with this team. I think Ottawa probably has a better season. The under in Toronto, I just think that Vegas overrates them. Pittsburgh, no Crosby for a little bit, no Malkin for a bit, under there as well. So that's all we got here for some futures. A whole lot more over at ftmbets.com. Alexander Barkov, 25-1 to win the Hart. Get in on it now. Enjoy the hockey, enjoy the baseball, and we'll be back tomorrow. Cheers.